Alright, so like I said, today we're finishing up the last bit of information on Platyaminthes, and tomorrow we'll move on to Nematoda. We still have Nematoda to learn, and we still have the Annelida, which are the segmented worms to learn. So we're not done with this unit yet. We've still got a bit in here that we need to do, and also we are going to do a worm dissection later on as well. So still quite a bit before we finish up this unit and move on to our next. But to finish up with the Platyaminthes, these are the first animals to have a head. This is called a cephalopod. Cepha means head, pod means like an extension. So they are the first ones that have a head. It makes sense when you think about it. So far we learned of sponges and jellyfish and corals. They didn't really have a head. They had feeding tentacles, they had kind of that polyp form, but not really a distinct head region. So these are the first ones that have a head, and we already mentioned the two eye spots. The two eye spots do not see like our eyes see. They're basically just detecting light versus dark. So if something is really bright, they can see that. If something is kind of shadowed, they can sense that. They are the first animals to have a centralized nervous system. Before we had these, the sponges and the jellyfish, they didn't really have a nervous system. They had the stinging tentacles, of course, but they didn't really have a nervous system that told the rest of their body what to do. It was mostly operating on like pure instinct. They have a very, very simple brain. It's called a neural ganglion, and basically it's just a bunch of nerves that are kind of all jumbled up together, and that's the only real brain that they have. Obviously, brains have come a long way since then, and they have become much more complicated. So this is what they look like, and these are the planera that we will be working with when we do the lab. So they're bigger than the hydra. They're something that you can actually see better without the microscope. And when we do the lab, what we'll be doing is we'll be cutting them and then watching how they regenerate over like a week or two. Because different kinds of cuts will produce different kinds of planera. They are one of the best at regenerating, as that assignment that we did kind of indicated. So here we have our eye spots. This is the cerebral ganglion, which is that neural ganglion, kind of the little brain that they have. And then they have the cords that kind of run down either side. They have a central portion, which is their gastrovascular cavity, so basically where they eat. They have that pharynx, which is where the mouth comes, or like they eat through this and they expel waste through it. So it's very, very primitive. So they have two large nerve cords that run down either side of their body, and many nerves that go back and forth between it. Think of it as kind of like a ladder with different rungs of the ladder, and that's how their body communicates. They do have tiny hairs to help them move, and the tiny hairs are called cilia. We will see other animals that have cilia. The paramecium that we talked about, one of the protists, also had cilia. So cilia are pretty common in smaller creatures. We also have cilia in our body on some of our cells to help us move fluid around, to catch debris, things like that. The body is also going to be covered in slime, which helps them move, but
snowman.
We will go outside a lot more if I find people. And I think they're gonna give me one. I'm so excited. Alright, anyways, on with notes. So the nervous system has that ganglion, and then they have the pharynx, and then they have the long extensions on either side with the nerves connecting them. These are a flame cell. Now the flame cells are really important. We're going to talk a lot more about those as we go on. But the flame cells help with the movement of fluids throughout the body, and they can also help with excreting things. So flatworms can regenerate. And that's one of the things we're going to be doing in our lab is regenerating that flatworm. Each group will get to decide like how to cut it the different way that they want, and they'll be able to observe that and see how that regenerates over time.
Can we like cut it in half, or like does it have to be like they still have to be connected when we cut them?
You can cut it in half if that's what your group chooses. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment because the way you cut it determines how they regrow.
So does it have like multiple like?
If you cut it into 3, it might grow into 3. They're really good at regenerating.
Weren't we supposed to do something like that in this martial class?
Yeah, that was 2 years ago. That was last year. No, I don't remember.
All right, so flame cells. They have cilia that move fluid through the flatworm. So it's kind of like a very primitive circulatory system. We've got blood that moves things through our body, but they don't have blood because they absorb a lot of their nutrients across the surface. But the flame cells, they have that little cilia that they move around, and it kind of helps to move the fluid around. So it kind of does the same thing that our circulatory system does, but in a very, very primitive way. They can reproduce asexually by splitting into 2 identical worms, so that's like cloning, like budding that we've seen before. And they are hermaphroditic. Hold on, I'm just gonna check something. Okay, I did talk about it. I wanted to make sure we talked about how they reproduce sexually because it's very interesting. And I wanted to make sure it was in there. But they are hermaphroditic, which increases their chance of reproduction. If they have both male and female parts, that's what hermaphroditic means, male and female parts, then that means that they don't have to worry about finding a male flatworm or female. They just have to find another flatworm. And this is a strategy that earthworms use too. Earthworms are also hermaphroditic. They have both male and female parts. They don't have to worry about finding a female worm. They just have to find another worm, and that's going to allow them to exchange egg and sperm and keep the genetic diversity, but makes it a little simpler so it's easier to find a mate.
Did you hear about that bird that was super endangered and reproduced by itself?
Did not. It doesn't surprise
Mr.
me.
Smalley was talking
Yeah.
about it
I'll have to look it up now.
Wednesday or Tuesday. But there's like a super endangered bird, and I guess they
Figured out how to clone itself.
yeah.
That's cool. There's lizards that I know that they're all female lizards, and some of the lizards will act like males to stimulate the females to grow eggs, but they basically just clone themselves. So it's like this whole colony of lizards that do that.
And they're only females.
They're only female, but some of the females start acting like males to stimulate it. So. But yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's a bird that did something similar.
I didn't think they could do that.
Nature is weird. You guys have all heard of the zombie ant, right? I told you about that.
Zombie ant.
Did not tell you about the zombie ant?
No.
So the zombie ant is, it's in the rainforest, thankfully not here, but it's a fungus that takes over an ant. It actually can take over, like, different species of fungus can take over different types of insects, but it takes over the ant and turns it into a zombie. And if the colony recognizes that the ant is infected, they will try and get rid of the ant and take it out of the colony. But eventually the fungus will completely take over the ant and make it go up to a high place, and then a mushroom sprouts out of its head, and then it releases spores that go and infect other ants. So So that's why.
That's kind of dope.
That's why if the colony recognizes that it's infected, they'll try and get rid of it. Otherwise, once the spores are released, they'll all become infected. So it's a zombie ant.
Is there like a video like showing how it works?
Can we see?
Finish notes and then yes, we can watch it. I believe we didn't talk about the zombie ant yet. All right, we good with this slide?
Bro, what kind of mushroom is that?
He's already looking. So flame cells. Here's our flame cell, and here's the excretory pore. So this is the cilia inside it that kind of goes back and forth. That's going to make the water move, or fluid move. So it's helping to move nutrients and other materials through the worm's body. And that is, instead of a circulatory system, a heart and blood vessels like we have. Here is the planaria and what would happen if you made different cuts. So if you just cut off its head, the head would eventually grow back a little body. If you cut off this middle section, the middle section would grow a head and a tail, and you'd be able to get a little body out of that. If you cut out the tail section, it wouldn't be quite as good, but it would still regenerate. So we're going to get a planaria. You can also like divide it straight. My hand is shaking. Not straight down the center here, and then it would have two heads if you didn't cut it all the way. So they're really, really good at regenerating, and that is what we'll be doing in the lab. You have to imagine we're gonna have to be really precise with our cuts as much as we can. We'll have scalpels, and if we put the slide on ice, it'll kind of make them cold a little bit so that we can make the cut and they don't move as much. So hopefully we'll get the funding for that through soon, and we'll be able to get those ordered.
Will earthworms reproduce? Or not reproduce?
We'll talk about that. It's a misconception that earthworms will regenerate like this. If you cut a worm, then half of it will live, but the other half will die. And the half with, it's called a clitellum. The little, when you look at an earthworm, there's like a thicker piece to it. That actually turns into an egg sac, but that's the half that would live.
But don't they have more than one heart or something weird, or is that something else?
Something else. Most of their organs are toward that clitellum side, and that's the mouth side, and everything else is mostly digestive tract.
It's been so long since I've actually like looked at one.
Well, we're gonna dissect them. All right, so here's another example. Like if you cut these, you could get 3 out of it. If you cut it in half, you could get 2 heads. So anyway, it'll be an interesting lab. Like I said, this is another lab I've never done. So we'll give it a try, and hopefully it works out. All right, now this is really interesting. Flatworms do something called penis fencing. This is where the 2 flatworms will basically fight with their penises, and whichever one wins will stab the other and inject the sperm into it, and then that one the one that gets injected with the sperm becomes the female. So that's how, because they have both male and female parts. So that's how they determine who's the male and who actually has to carry the eggs, because nobody really wants to carry the eggs because it takes more work and it takes more energy. And remember that in nature, everything comes back to energy. How can I get the most benefit with the least amount of effort? That's what we all do daily. How can I get the most bang for my buck? So carrying the eggs and taking care of young takes a lot of energy. So they will fight over who gets to do that. And whichever one gets stabbed with the penis and injected with the sperm, that one becomes the female, and the other one has carried on its genetic responsibility. So, really interesting that they do this, but kind of neat at the same time.
Well, they're gonna look at my history and see that, and they're gonna be like, what is this guy looking at?
I think they gave up looking at like a science teacher's history, like search history, a long time ago, because we search up the weirdest things, the weirdest pictures. You never know what you're gonna learn in here. Zombie ants, penis fencing.
That's what I'm saying. Is they're gonna look at my search history. I'm gonna look up a video as soon as I finish these notes.
They do it on there.
See, I'm gonna bring this up. You're like, Dad, you know what fuzz fencing is? What are you talking about?
Well, do you guys know what a vacuum is? Since we're on that topic.
Like a plant vacuum?
No, a vacuum.
That would be a vacuum.
Vacuum? Or
V-A-C-U-L-U-M. A vacuum is a penis bone that is found in many animals. Minks actually have them. The largest one belongs to a walrus, and it's something like 3 feet.
What? 3 feet?
Mm-hmm. It may actually be longer. I think it's 3 feet. I think mice and rats also have a vacuum.
She said walrus?
A walrus has the longest.
Dude, I'm about to ask Andy if he knows what those guys that are. It's gonna get so
We had we had a plastic replica at the zoo, and sometimes like the volunteers didn't know what it is, and they'd be like, "What's this?" And I'm like,
Oh, bro, this is kind of.
"Vacuum."
Oh.
The dude just holding it like it's nothing. Oh, it's the bone.
It's the bone.
It's holding. Why does it?
Curve.
Yeah. It just
Because
goes, it goes like this though. It's like. It's like
It
a
matches the
racetrack.
anatomy of the female walrus.
Oh my gosh, last night I saw on TikTok.
Okay.
Bunny's
Oh.
tails. No, bunny's tails. They're actually pulling her out. I was sitting there, I'm like, what?
Actually,
My life is a lie. I didn't know
Yeah,
that
if you
was
grab it, they come out. They're like this long.
This is
interesting.
All right.
Brody.
So here is what the reproductive system looks like. Remember, they only have one opening, so everything comes out of that pharynx opening. If they get stabbed with the penis, then the sperm is absorbed, and that one becomes the female. But you can see they do have both reproductive parts. The pinkish reddish is the female, and then the blue is the male reproductive.
This doesn't look like fencing though. Like they don't even look like they're trying to fight. It just looks like one's just and it's done.
All right, let's look up zombie ants. I'll put a video on about them. Give me a second.
Hey, I put flatworm in front of it, so maybe they won't call me to the office.
Yeah, that's probably smart because we just looked up that, then look here, look here.
Fungi and slime molds race to decompose dead matter on the forest
I'm just
floor.
Morgan Freeman.
Many spread by releasing spores, up to 30,000 a second. If just one of these spores lands in the right place and takes root, it can colonize a whole new area.
So all those little dust things are spores.
But not all fungi feed on the dead.
You just say fungi.
Yeah.
Is it like breathed in, or is it like stick?
It does die.
Days ago, a spore landed on this ant. Now she's acting strange. A network of roots has infiltrated her muscles. Her body has been taken over by cordyceps, a parasitic fungus. It floods her brain with chemicals, drugging her, compelling her to head where conditions are perfect. Just the right amount of light, just the right amount of humidity for the parasite growing inside. forces her to clamp down in a death bite, and cordyceps reveals its gruesome nature.
Isn't that gross? Mm-hmm. It's a type of fungus.
After 3 weeks of growth,
Takes 3 weeks.
To grow out of its head.
cordyceps can release its own spores.
No, the ant is dead.
Releasing more spores, infecting more ants, releasing more spores, infecting more ants, infecting more ants, more ants, more ants, more ants.
Oh. And Grimmer.
They've all got mushrooms growing out of them.
Cordyceps can wipe out entire ant colonies. But more than just ants are at risk.
That one's growing a lot.
Different fungus species affect
There
different.
are over 600
animals,
species
see?
of cordyceps spread across the world. Most are found in jungles,
Thank goodness.
where they prey on a whole host
Imagine
of
a human could do
victims.
that.
There's a movie called The Girl with All the Gifts, and it's about a zombie apocalypse, but instead of like a typical zombie, it's like a fungus has infected their brain like this.
Ew.
It was a really good movie. I liked it a lot.
Grow out of her?
The Girl with All the Gifts.
Ew.
What's that one movie called, like, I Love Brains, or I Eat Brains, or something like that?
I think so.
Yeah, the show, what is it called?
All right, on that note, your assignment for today is in Google Classroom, and it's called Monsters Inside Me. We have been learning about parasites, we have been learning about nematodes and flatworms and all those other creepy crawly things. Well, now we're gonna watch some videos about it. Monsters Inside Me was a series by Animal Planet, and you can go to YouTube and just Google Monsters Inside Me. You need to watch 5 different videos of your choice. They need to be about animals though, like, it can affect a human, but it has to be like a worm that's affecting a human. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I love this
How
show.
long is it
Wonderful. It's
video?
scared the crap
So
out
the
of me.
videos, most of them are about 8 minutes or
8
something.
minutes? Okay.
Yeah. But
I
it'll
was
be
like
due Friday,
five,
so
but
we've got
I was
time.
That's
expecting
gonna be
like 20-minute
20
videos, so I'm like,
Yeah. Most of them are about 8 minutes.
Yeah.
You can pick any 5 that you like, as long as it has to do with animals in some way. Okay? Like I said, it can affect a human, that's fine, but it has to be like an animal that's affecting a human.
what is it called?
Monsters Inside Me.
So like a-
Yeah. So that is your assignment for today. You can go ahead and get started on that. Not going to be due till this coming Friday at 4
All
o'clock.
we have to do is watch them.
Watch the videos. There's an assignment where you have to like summarize it and tell me which video and that kind of thing. So,
We just have to watch it.
well, I gotta have proof that you watched it.
Yeah.
You don't trust our word?
I don't trust your word. I do, but
Oh man, am I trying to watch this slide?
It's the restroom.
Go there.